So this tutorial I'm going to show you how to become a zombie. Well, not that kind of zombie. Well, maybe that kind of zombie. I'll show you how to get the eyes, the skin, the lips, and the hair. Starting with this latex prosthetic that I made myself, you can see how in this sculpting and molding video. I held it up against my face to work out that it would fit properly, and then applied Prose-Aide adhesive on the back of the prosthetic, but avoided the very outer edges, and I also put the Prose-Aide over my lips. I wanted to line up the fake upper lip with my real upper lip and the lower lip with my lower lip, so I could slightly open my mouth through the slit that I had cut there for a space to drink water through a straw or to be able to talk a little bit. But as this piece is hollow and doesn't have a conformed back to fit my lips securely, I didn't quite get the feel for it or line up correctly with the glue on, so I ended up placing the upper lip a little bit too low and it stuck to my bottom lip, effectively gluing my mouth closed. If there's ever a tutorial that's like, hey, do this makeup but you won't be able to open your mouth the whole time so you can't talk, eat or drink, lol, like, just don't do it. I had my mouth glued closed for about 2.5 hours while applying this and taking photos, and it sucked so much. Like, always make sure you can access your mouth even if it's just like a tiny slit for water and talking, because it just makes a huge difference. Learn from me. I then started gluing down those outer thinner edges, so I left this step until last so they wouldn't flip up onto themselves and cause bad edges. Next I used a 50-50 mix of spirit gum and 99% alcohol. Goldie's Stelling used this edge blender on her channel, which is where I saw it, and she credited it to Dick Smith, and it's pretty good at blending an edge for thin latex. I do think that it worked quite well. And then lastly I used Bondo, which is a thickened Prose-Aide cream, around any edges that were still a little bit too thick. So this will fill in the harsher edge and make it appear as a smoother transition onto the real skin. So you can see the color of the prosthetic is really not at all close to my skin tone. So I will start with an opaque color for this just to really cover it all up. You can use packs for this or a rubber mask grease paint. I'm going to be using the latter, so it's a Mehron mask cover palette for light skin tones. I'm going to start off with the lightest skin tone first. And I have diluted this with a little bit of 99% alcohol on the brush because the color was a bit thick and old and I was having trouble working with it. And I then went over it with a darker color from the same palette in the mid-range of colors. And then afterwards that dried, I'm going to move on to my Skin Illustrator alcohol activated paints for more subtle coloring. I am using the Coral Adjuster from the Light Fleshtones palette to add some more warmth back into the prosthetic, as it is a very yellow color at the moment and there's not really any red tones in it. I used a stipple brush to apply this. And now moving on to splattering it with a chip brush, I'm going to use the Natural 1 color first, and then I put a subtle layer of vein tone to add some cool back in, and then I went to Natural 2 to add a little bit of darker tones, and then to Rice Paper for lighter tones, and then I finished off color matching with a little bit more Natural 1 tone. I'm just going to do this first so that it's easier to color the whole face later. So now I'm going to take off the shine in this latex by using a little bit of anti-shine cream and powder. Now that I've color matched that, I will work on the skin tone and texture for the whole face using primarily the Grunge palette by Skin Illustrator. First I will use Prairie Dust to start to contour my face to make it look more sunken, especially around my eye socket, cheekbones and temples, and then I will create some wrinkles and furrow lines with that color. I will then combine Rotten Stone and Dark Brun to create a darker tone to build up those contours and wrinkles, and then use a brush dampened with 99% alcohol just to blend it out and soften it up a little bit. I think you can use regular face paint for this as well. I just wasn't sure how water or cream based things would sit on latex. I don't really own a lot of water or cream based makeup, so I was just sticking to my Skin Illustrator because it's what I'm used to using, but it can be a little bit fumey to use and it can be drying to skin, so don't go too crazy with it. And then to go right up around my eyes, I'm going to go into cream colors. So I'm using Ben Nye's Ultimate Effects palette. I'm using the pink color around my eyes and then darkening it slightly with the brown and vein blue tones. Now I'm going back with some Skin Illustrator inks and an airbrush for the first time actually, and I was surprised by how great the vein blue tone came out. It's the perfect translucency. You can easily paint these veins by hand as well if you don't own an airbrush. I was just excited to play with some new products and use a range of techniques in this video. Then I'm going in with a capillary color to do pretty much exactly the same thing but a bit more dark and sickly looking. I'm going over everything with the grey matter ink, both to deaden up my skin a little bit and also to help soften the contouring and wrinkles and veins to make it look a bit more natural. I then also used the rice paper to bring it back a little bit as the grey was overpowering everything. This is the first time I used airbrush colour over my whole face, so it wasn't super even. If you have any patches where the colour just gets too thick, you can dampen a tissue with some 99% alcohol and just kind of dab it over the area to take back some of the colouring. I noticed my cheekbones got a little dark and I wanted to brighten them up to make my skull shape appear a little bit bonier. So I started to go over it with a rice paper color to lighten it, but then I decided just to wipe away all the excess color with a cotton tip and some 99% alcohol, and then stipple some rice paper on top so it didn't get as muddy looking. Now that the base is done, I'm going to color in the mouth detail, first starting with the more lifelike colors, so the Coral Adjuster from the Fleshtones palette, just around the gum line and the lips and everything, and then using the Rose Adjuster as well, just to add a little bit more pinkiness. And then I used the Blood Tones from the FX palette just around the real rotted away, decayed areas to add some redness there. I then removed any of the colour buildup from the resin teeth with a cotton tip and some alcohol so they looked more tooth coloured. And then I put some more contrast into the teeth by painting prairie dust and dark brown just around the edges of the teeth to create just a grosser look. I also used dark brown, soot and prairie dust around the rotted mouth area and the cheek area just to make it look a bit more dead and a bit less pink and alive. Lastly, I'm applying fake blood, so I'm using my favourite, which is Mold Life Kensington Gore in Age, and I just went a bit crazy with it. I dripped it everywhere and brushed it on quite messily, put a few fake drops and splatter around, and then gave it a minute to dry, and then went in with some tissues and some cotton tips, both wet and dry, just to start smearing around the blood for a more authentic lived-in look. Now, for longevity of wear, you can apply a sealer over all of your makeup job if you want. Something like Ben Nye Final Seal or blue or green marble works well. And moving on to my hair, to ground and zombify up the hair, I like using just a shit ton of conditioner, just whatever cheapest conditioner you can find at the store, maybe a bit of water to work into it. And then I found that this will usually evaporate and dry a little bit, so I like to just shoot it with a lot of hairspray while it's still wet, so it stays quite wet and manky looking and just doesn't dry up to look luscious. It just stays really disgusting. And then to complete the look, I put in my contact lens. I did get these from my optometrist because safety first. It's one blind eye and one mesh eye, so my vision was at maybe 30%, so it was quite hard to see with these in, so just keep that in mind for contact lens use. This is the finished look for our latex zombie. In the description box, I'll put instructions on how to remove it and my thoughts on whether it's worth it to do this technique, the pros and cons of this kind of prosthetic application, just the same stuff I mentioned in the video on molding. You can check out those videos here, the molding and the sculpting video, and there are more videos on my channel about liquid latex as well. Thanks for watching. You can subscribe here for updates about when new videos are released, and I will see you guys soon.